a comparison with the Yas-107 soundbar from Yamaha, the Yas-109 soundbar from Yamaha. So this is coming out in late 2019. It's the update to the Yas-108, which was the update to the Yas-107. So that means the Yas-109 is obviously the soundbar to go for if you want something in a package like this. Or is it? Going to explain to you my reasons why I prefer the Yas-107. I'm going to be sending this back and getting a new Yas-107. A lot of it is to do with usability issues. So get straight to it. First of all, one of the most useful things about the Yas-107 was how easy it was to get all the information from your display. The first thing you're going to notice is how much smaller the display is now. 1.5 centimeters, 1 centimeter. So 2/3 the width. And it's not just, what was a great feature of the Yas-107, that it's smaller, but the lights are now so small that if you're sitting any distance from the soundbar, it's really hard to see what it relates to. So let me show you just by up and down the volume on these two, and you'll see the difference in lights. Well, this is turning itself off. Let me turn it back on. So if I go up and down, hopefully you are noticing these are tiny little LEDs. Well, these are nice, big, square and green as opposed to the white LEDs. So first of all, it's a lot easier to see from a distance what's going on the Yas-107. And that's when it's something that's actually on the display. A lot of the stuff is not on the display because on the old one, you could see immediately what you was playing, whether it's virtual surround from a DTS track or a Dolby digital surround track or even Dolby Pro Logic. It's there. While the soundbar is on, you know all the time what you are playing, which is obviously important if you're bit streaming, doing pass-through. You want to know exactly what's going on because it's easy to get it wrong at the source. On this one, well, there is no display for the DTS. What you have to do is turn the whole thing off. Well, no, sorry, you don't turn it off. What you have to do is start pressing your info buttons. And from the lights that then come on, you can see what source track you're playing. However, because they're so tiny, you're going to have to come right up to the soundbar to see what's going on. Whereas you can see what's going on from a distance on the Yas-107. Usability issues. Even though it's a smaller display, part of the display is now given over to Alexa. In fact, 3 of those LEDs are now for Alexa. The one in red is telling me I've got my mics for Alexa off. Next to it, I've got a wake up button for Alexa. And next to that, I can turn the mics off for Alexa. Yes, if you want Alexa, it's a nice feature. But to go from 30 centimeters to 20 centimeters, and then 3 of them are just for Alexa, which is not on the Yas-107. If you don't want to use Alexa, that's a huge chunk of usability gone. Just to say, they are both touch displays, and from the display you can turn them on and off, volumes up and down, change the source, and do the Alexa stuff. This side is not touch sensitive. So I only really want to talk about the differences because I've done video reviews on both of them talking about the features. The differences, if you're interested, apart from usability, first of all, you got Bluetooth 5 now on your Yas-109. It's Bluetooth 4.1 on the Yas-107. However, they're both basic Bluetooth in that it's AAC SBC, so no fancy codecs for Bluetooth support. On the Yas-107, if you want to use the app, it's via Bluetooth, whereas for the 109, it's via your network. There is now on the back an Ethernet port, so you can hardwire into your network, but you can also use Wi-Fi. And I think that's the difference because it's a new app for the 109. It's absolute crap. It's very clunky, very hard to use, doesn't update in real time when you use the remote, very poorly designed. Whereas it's a really nice, well thought out app when you use the Yas-107 and it's via Bluetooth. The app for the 109, Ethernet or Wi-Fi. In adding the Ethernet port, They've taken away your analog, your auxiliary input. If that's something you want to make use of, no, you get that on the 107, not on the 109. Otherwise, pretty much the same. You've got optical. You've got a subwoofer out on both of them. That's a really useful feature of the 107 and 109. It does make upgrading it pretty tasty in that you can use any aftermarket subwoofer. The RCA out for a third-party subwoofer. You've also got an HDMI in, an HDMI out, and the out HDMI on both of them is ARC, audio return channel. So that's the differences on the back. In terms of weight, about the same, 3.5 kilos, almost the same in length and width, except that you've got rounded features on the 109. It's square, it's a harder side on the 107. They are both rated at 120 watts, 60 watts going to the subwoofers, a pair of them either side, 30 watts going to the tweeters and woofers. Tweeters on the front, woofers up the top. Now, that's also something that's going to matter, because you can have this on a wall facing you, or you can have it firing up. Firing up is useful because it comes with Virtual X. Virtual X said to give you on the fly height information. Height information, you want your speakers firing up. But of course, when you have your speakers firing up, even though tweeters are facing you, you're losing clarity. Obviously, that way is much clearer sounding because, you know, the woofers that are taking most of the frequency range pointing straight at you. It's not diffused. So you want to know, all right, mate, so there's some differences in how you use it, and it looks a bit different, but we just want it to sound good. When I was listening to my 109 on my review, and I was doing my test tracks, and I was, you know, going through the trailers and having to listen to what I've heard before on the 107, struck me that I wasn't getting quite, you know, the smiley face from it that I was getting on the 107 on the 109. Something not quite right. That's why I wanted to do a proper A/B comparison, sound-wise, between the 107 and the 109. So I'm testing standard surround. In other words, how are the tracks actually encoded, not Virtual X where it's done on the fly. So playing the track as it was intended, it's going to be obviously downmixed from 5.1 to 2.0. This is a stereo soundbar at the end of the day, even though it's headlined 5.1. So comparing standard surround, movie mode, subwoofers at 0, bass extension off. Both at 50% according to their volume scales. They both have 50 steps of volume, so 25 steps up on both of these soundbars, and also at absolute max to get rid of any differences in that, if it was not quite as linear as one bar compared to the other. So both 50% and max sound test.
We were born into a world at war. Between the monsters that destroyed our cities and the monsters we created to stop them. We thought we had sacrificed enough. But the war we thought we finished is just beginning. And the only thing standing in front of the apocalypse is us. But it doesn't matter where you came from, who believed in you and who didn't. This is our time, this is our chance to make a difference. Now let's get it done. That's what I'm talking about. They've evolved and they could wipe out all life.
I think I could get used to this.
There's something you need to see.
Fire everything you've got!
The 109, 50% volume. The 107, 50% volume. Big difference in the bass. At 53 Hz, 107 actually 3.5 decibels louder in the bass. Was a surprise to me. The 109, much stronger. 800 Hz to around 3000 Hz. Then you get this dip. Then you get a significant peak around 8000 Hz. Then you get the dip. Another significant peak, 15 kilohertz. Rapid roll-off, 18,000 Hz. 107, much smoother sounding, much warmer sounding, doesn't have those peaks, extends further right up to 20,000 Hz. So the 109 sharper sounding, 107 warmer sounding, bigger bass. Maximum volume, basically the same story. The 109, the 107, the 107 about 2 decibels bigger bass, 47 Hz. Then the 109, much sharper sounding, maybe more dynamic sounding, but to me a little bit harsh. Much stronger, 800 Hz to about 3000 Hz. The big peaks, 8000 Hz, 15,000 Hz. Rapid roll-off, 107, extending further, doesn't have those peaks, smoother sounding. You may deem that to be less in the way of clarity. Took me a bit by surprise, the 107, at these settings at least, having a significantly bigger lower bass. I thought I'd better redo these tests. Let me do it in standard surround mode, and I'm going to use a musical track because it's going to be easier to pick out differences just using your ears.
Bit of a surprise to me, you know, on that like-for-like test, significant difference in how the bass is produced on the 107 to the 109. Is that because they're decoding in a different way, or is it because, you know, the drivers are now different? It was also noticeable, the 109 sounding, well, it's got that really sharp peak around 8000 Hz. Can be quite harsh and sibilant. Depending on your ears, it may actually make it clearer. And that's an issue if you're going to have them firing up. You know, your high range listening is not quite what it was. You may prefer that sharper sound. If it's going to be face on, I think it's, to my ears, that becomes overly sharp. That becomes harsh. So if you're having it face on, I prefer the smoother sound of the 107. However, I was a bit surprised by that bass, so I had to do a test again. And also, while I'm doing this test, a lot of people want a soundbar that can play music as well. I thought, these are stereo soundbars at the end of the day. Let's go straight stereo. So in straight 2.2 mode, if you count the subwoofers as 0.2s, but in straight stereo mode with a music track, because when you put these clips side by side, A and B, it does make it easier to pick out the differences. When you're playing movie tracks, they're virtually impossible because it's changing so much on these trailers. So straight stereo mode.
Hasta que me convierta en rayos y más allá, a través de la gran oscuridad y más
This time 50% volume 107, 109. Well, now the bass is the same. Looks like some of these differences are the way the different soundbars are doing the decoding. So, same in the bass, but the 109 still has those peaks around 8,000 Hz, 15,000 Hz. Does roll off quicker than the 107 that extends right up to 20,000 Hz. And a quick listen, the 109 sounding maybe a bit more dynamic in music tracks, the 107 smoother, maybe a bit more natural. Maximum volume, again, about the same in bass, basically identical. The differences now really are those sharp peaks on the 109 and how the 107 extends further up towards the 20,000 Hz than the 109 does. So some of those differences remain. The 109 is a sharper sounding soundbar, but in music there isn't much of a difference in the bass. Well, there isn't a difference, but there is in surround sound mode. A bit weird.
So music mode, now the bass is about the same, so why it's different when you're playing movies, I do not know in standard surround. But the difference between the two is clear. The 107 is smoother sounding. I think it's more suited to one axis for sure, but overall I prefer it anyway. I'm finding it sharper. Once you hit Virtual X, Virtual X is quite a harsh sounding, can be quite harsh sounding, especially when pushed mode, because it's accentuating, on purpose, a lot of the timbre sounds and the sharp sounds, which gives you a sense of spaciousness. However, because it's already on the harsh side, has these weird spikes. I do prefer the 107, sound-wise, usability-wise. Otherwise, they're going to go about as loud as each other. There is a difference in bass depending on which mode you're going to use it in, but the usability, for me, if you don't need Bluetooth 5, if you don't need Alexa, to me it's a no-brainer to go 107. I was always happy with the 107, not being happy with the 109. It is ridiculous that they've reduced the size of the display anyway, and then give 3 of the actual parts of that display over just to Alexa. I will mention at this point anyway, because Alexa also features on the remotes. There is a difference if you're interested in the remotes. The main difference is they've made it an easier button for clear voice, if that's something you want to do. So your main 2 buttons, 3D surround, clear voice, whereas it was stereo surround. I prefer to be able to just switch straight from stereo surround and be able to find it easy, whereas stereo is now down here. So before, in the All Singing, All Dancing app, you went into that app to change the modes, if you wanted to go movie, TV, music, blah, blah, blah. Whereas now you've got dedicated buttons on the remote. You've also got your Alexa wake up button there. But of course they've added this info button, which to me, it's really awkward to use, to have to go up and then see which lights are going, and then trying to remember, oh, that means that one, and that means that one. And then you end up having to print out part of your manual, because you can never remember what it's actually referring to. So, and also actually, I've got the dimmer button on my 107. There's no dimmer lights. That's another thing that you've got to go in and set up in an awkward way on the 109. That is something I personally use, depending on how light it is in the room or how dark it is, and whether you want those LEDs on or not. It is nice to have that function on the remote. So if you haven't got it yet, I'm much happier living with the 107, and this 109 is going back. I may try the 209, to be honest with you, because you get the dedicated sub. So maybe it makes it a smoother experience on the main soundbar itself. The problem with the 207, of course, was there was some of that speech was being handed over to the sub because the crossover was wrong, which is not good. You don't want speech coming from your sub. It makes placement far more awkward. I don't know if that's still an issue on the 209. I would expect not, as it was it was an obvious fault which they couldn't rectify on the 207. So yeah, personally, I would say get the 107. It's a bit cheaper, although it's still not, it's not half the price, but you can certainly get bargains on the 107 that you're not getting on the 209. You think very carefully about those usability issues, because once you actually start using it, it is a big factor. So hope you got something out of my video, and thank you for watching.
UK